Yo guys, what's going on? It's Max, and in today's video, I wanted to discuss Otzdarva's recent video on the myth of DBD balance. Now, I know that's going to be a subject that's going to cause a lot of hate. All I ask is that the comments are relatively civil, and don't dislike the video if opinions or statements I make or from other content creators have made do not match yours. I want this to be a more positive, healthy discussion. I've seen this happen on Twitter and everyone was going on a rampage. Of course it's Twitter, so go figure. That's probably gonna cause some people to get mad at me. But I just ask for it to be civil. And most notably, this will be my tiny PSA, just as a quick thing. Momo, content creator for Dead by Daylight, hit a 1,000 win streak on Blight. In my opinion, extremely impressive. I will leave a link to their Twitch stream in the description below. Please go give them love and support if you do want to see some awesome Blight gameplay. The statements I'll make regarding that gameplay has nothing to do with them as a person. It's just more on the critique of the game's fundamental balance and the fact that someone was able to achieve a 1,000 win streak on Killer. And I feel like that's just a tiny fact that I want to chuck in because it was something that was brought to light relatively recently, and people have been using as evidence to really skew the perspective that they believe the game is beyond like heavily killer sided. And I would like to disagree with that. Not to say it's extremely survivor sided, but the game is more balanced than people are making it out to be in terms of the extremes of balance. I want to be very clear on my perspective as well. Prior to the 1,000 win streak on Blight and prior to the discussions around Otzdarva's video, I personally would say this game skewed survivor sided at the higher levels of play. Not by much. I'm not saying it was, end all be all, but it definitely was a little bit more in favor of survivors. That's how I view the game. If you view the game completely differently, you're more than welcome to do so. I want to promote more discussion on the fundamentals of why that's the case. So, with all that out of the way, I want to talk about the balance of Dead by Daylight. I think Otzdarva's video does a phenomenal job of examining objective statistics in the game, as well as some perspectives that really bring to light what makes DBD competitive and which side the game particularly leans on. Now, talking about statistics, the game is pretty close to averaging a 60% kill rate, which the developers are aiming for as a goal. And from the recent statistics, well, relatively recent, I believe it's about a year ago now, from the statistics they released about MMR, the game is around a 60% win rate across all ranks. And it's 60, not 50, and Otz talks about it a little bit. Essentially, if everyone has a small chance to mess up and it's a game-changing mess up, 4 survivors versus 1 killer, there's more opportunities for the survivors to make that big mess up. And if you play killer, you'll recognize if you have one teammate that makes a mistake, it could snowball into a pretty bad game for the survivors. If you get somebody out pretty early, you'll recognize it's pretty hard to win that game back. So all in all, I personally think the 60% metric for kill rate is fair. And as it currently stands for data, it suggests that the game is pretty balanced. So I think that's pretty cool. That information is about a year old at this point. I still think it's a valid piece of information. And that's just because across the different ranks and across different killers, and this is another point that I will get into in a little bit, that the choice of killer and presumably perks matters heavily in the discussion of balance. And I think similarly for Survivor, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Probably the first thing that I wanted to get into was Otzdarva's hierarchy of needs for Dead by Daylight balance. He made a little diagram. I'll pull it up on the video right now so you can see over it, that essentially there's 4 different factors that determine the balance of the game, and in order of most to least impactful, it is experience, resources, mindset, and RNG. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I do feel as though those components matter a lot. And at least for me personally, I don't play the game, to a hyper competitive level, I'm fairly confident I haven't experienced top of the line play, except a couple times I played against teams that were regional tournament winners for community cups and community tournaments. I would feel that push the limit of my like skill in Dead by Daylight. Long story short, I got rolled on Killer. They played super efficient, great Survivor games. But I do want to talk about that because that first component of Otzdarva's little pyramid is experience. I firmly agree with that. I don't think anyone would disagree that the more time you have in the game, the more experience you have in the game and its mechanics, fundamentally the better you're about to play. Now, I want to be clear, that isn't necessarily a linear relationship of the experience or time invested into the game to your skill being demonstrated. I personally think that over more time, the amount of time you invest into the game gives you like diminishing returns. It's not necessarily like if I have twice as many hours as you, I'm twice as good as you. That's not the case, and definitely once you get to the higher level of hours played, like really, I personally think that the skill difference becomes smaller, but still noticeable. I know I can't loop every tile in the game. I don't know where maps are generating still as much. I still don't know all the totem spawns on every map, but I'm sure some people do. And it's like, that's stuff that you'll learn with time. Sorry for clearing my throat. I just woke up and weather's not good by me. Next on Otzdarva's list is resources. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't think I have ever played, other than when I was really trying to sweat and climb to rank 1 way back when I was starting for first achievements, that I brought the best of the best resources that I could. Way back when I grinded to rank 1 for the first time as Killer, I played Blight with White Ward to protect my offerings, which, by the way, technically isn't even the best resources I could bring. I could have brought a map offering or a Mori, but I did bring Compound 33 Alkring. I was sweaty. I brought some very meta perks at the time. That was Ruin Undying, Pop, and Corrupt, I think. No, I didn't have Pop. It was Ruin Undying, Corrupt, and I think I brought Barbecue. All very solid perks at the time, and that was what helped me win. And I think that I have not played many, or really like close to any games of Dead by Daylight, at least where I've seen a full set of 4 survivors bringing the absolute best of what they can. I haven't seen it. I think only a handful of times have I seen quote-unquote bully squads bringing, quad map offerings to Haddonfield and they all got balanced landing like they're ready to run infinites. It's happened to me a couple times, but I don't think that was inherently a extremely meta or strong choice. I think they could have brought better things. And interestingly, if you look at the tournament games from Otzdarva / Hens, like the survivors brought pretty interesting perks, and the killers had interesting builds. It's not like what I thought meta would be. And I'm just saying outright, all those players in those games, I'm going to say are better than me. So I value their opinions for the perk choices they brought. And it's super cool. But if you look at the resources, I'm not bringing in an item every game. I've only really bring blood point offerings. I'm running slippery meat for Christ's sakes. Like, I'm not playing meta, So the resources I'm bringing in also skew the direction of balance. And I think it's the fact that some people bring in a full sweat build and some people don't. And I think that's pretty important to recognize because a lot of people talk about survivor and killer balance, but I think those variables are still drastically different in some of those circumstances, which Otzdarva's and Hens' tournament tries to normalize, which is really good. Mindset is a critical component that they talk about. I personally think that's really, really good. I don't really play with the mindset to win anymore. I have friends who do. I have friends who don't. I have more fun playing the game, not trying to win, but just trying to have fun and make my build work, get challenges done. I have a completionist mentality, and admittedly, that's how I have fun in the game. Right now, I'm trying to do 50 unhooks. Slippery Meat and Deliverance are my staple perks. Otherwise, I just click on a tome, grab 2 perks that fit the tome challenge decently well, and send it. But you'll see right here, right? Some people will just talk about Nurse is OP. This is a beginning nurse player. And I was just talking with them saying like, you're doing great. Here's my suggestions for how to improve on nurse or, get some practice if they were beginning. But the thing is, in terms of that mindset, I don't really play to win. A couple people and my friends do. And when we played in an offline, 5-man scrim, I said, let's play with that competitive mentality, and then we can normalize that variable. But I think the thing is, it's never really like a clear, I know the killer's about to sweat this game, and I know the survivors are about to sweat this game. It's like, sometimes I have a survivor that's running urban evasion on my team, right? And I'm just like, well, I'm sure that maybe they're having fun. Maybe they think it's good, but the resource-wise, like when we look at those, different components, that's not really a meta pick. And I think that was just a cool thing to look at. The fact that I think the competitive mindset does not exist for everybody. I know some people who do it, and I know those factors are not necessarily in order of importance. Otzdarva says they are. I think they're a lot more interwoven. Because, your mindset affects the resources you bring in. Your experience affects the mindset you have in the game. I think all of those are genuinely valid points. When I was just starting out in the game, I wanted to win all my games. Now that I have a few hundred hours in it, dude, I literally threw against this nurse on purpose because I wanted to give them kills. I don't need that many more blood points. I could have easily escaped off of the deliverance, but I just wanted them to have kills because I recognized they were a newer nurse player, and it doesn't matter to me that I died. Like, let me go help them out, right? So when you look at all of those components together, it's like, how can we really discuss the balance of the game when those variables all seem like they're not standardized over a quote-unquote like experiment of the game? The final component that Otzdarva talks about is RNG. Map RNG, certain palette structures, maybe it's the hook spawns. There are things that are out of your control that do affect the game. I would argue pretty marginally, especially if we're talking about like resources. Once again, I think if you're burning a map offering, you're ready to sweat. Not a lot of people bring map offerings. I personally don't. My friend group mostly doesn't. It happens sometimes, for sure. It's definitely like a genuine consideration, but it's not always the case. And I thought that was something to talk about. Really quick, I will go into, just because I know my video ended right there, Otzdarva's video. I wanted to look at the perks and choices that survivors had, because this was you can bring whatever you want. And there were 5 games that were played. This is showcasing Otzdarva's games that he put on his video. So this one right here is talking about the no limit spirit versus a comp squad. And if you look, quad burned offerings, red Eerie on killer. I'm just gonna say outright, I don't see this end screen. I don't see this in my games. I'm just gonna say I believe these players are the best at Dead by Daylight, some of the best in the world. And in my opinion, I would believe that validates their perk choices, item choices, and the way that they played the game. Just because I know they're better than me. Otzdarva makes, I don't know if it was a joke, but he says like some people believe they're the best in the world at this game, and this is what I do and it works. I'm just gonna say, if these people have won community cups and community tournaments back to back, I'm willing to listen to their, perk choice and setup. So if we look at the best that you can bring, it's pretty interesting that there's still a little bit of variety in items, at least for Survivor. I don't play much Spirit. They did a full backpacking build with Mother-Daughter Ring, which I know it's, very, very powerful add-on. But looking at the Survivor perks, and when we talk about the meta for Survivors, there are a couple balanced landings, which I think if you were being taken to Leary, and this isn't Leary's, this is Crotus Pren / Father Campbell, Campbell's. They both have hills / decent main buildings that you could balance landing off of, so you could plan around that, which is pretty good. To prove thyself, 3 off the records. You see, a couple adrenalines. Notably, though, no one's got Unbreakable. And maybe it's because of the, competitive environment in which if we're both ready to sweat, you don't slug super often. I'll let you watch this game to kind of see how that plays out. But really interesting to see there's no unbreakable. Some people talk about decisive strike still being good. No decisive strikes here. Interestingly, no sprint bursts. I don't know if they knew the killer beforehand. I don't believe they did. But it's interesting to see there's no sprint burst. We got balanced landings, lithe. There's a dead hard in there. And the comp squad still has a very similar. You have the best Siptic for someone who's ready to take the first chase if they need to. Deliverance, ready to unhook yourself so you negate that pressure. Reassurance to try to get rid of the whole camping mentality. This person's build is committed to trying to get that first person off the hook. This is a different competitive mindset than what I've played with, like when I play with friends, and kind of how I approach the game. In my opinion, this is not a end screen that I see, like really ever, admittedly. So if we want to talk about balance and you can really throw the best of the best that you can, you know what? I guess a little bit spoiler alert. You can see it's a 4K. The Spirit played super awesome. I didn't even think about that, but my bad. The Spirit played super great. I think the game was still a really good showcase, but it's the fact that this is a Spirit that got a 4K against extremely good, knowledgeable survivors that are all bringing pretty meta perks. Spoiler alert for game 2, because I'm going to move to the end of that one to look at it. No Limits Blight versus the same set of survivors got taken to Leary's. The Blight had Compound 33, and I forget what the other add-on is, but 3 escapes. And if you look at the perk choices, pretty solid on the Blight. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. When you look at the survivors, you have very, very strong medkits. Interestingly, though, they're all a bit different. It seems like maybe, at least in my mind, I don't know why, I would have thought that your medkit choice was like pretty standard across the board. Like, I would figure if the syringe plus add-on was best, you would have everyone bringing syringe plus blank. But I guess the variety of a Siptic plus a heal, is really good. One person rushing with a toolbox. Interestingly enough, with Built to Last and Streetwise, which I don't think anyone would have docked as meta. You know what I mean? Like, when I talk about meta and Dead by Daylight, I'm not talking about Streetwise Built to Last on a purple toolbox. Honestly, I was thinking, and I think Scott Junn talked about it too, I was expecting that to be a Commodious toolbox, but it's purple. And maybe this was to try and speedrun the gen in the center of Leary's, because it's a pretty rough gen to get done. You'll see the same thing. Siptic on the Deliverance player. Lithe, Prove Thyself, Adrenaline off the record. This is kind of how I see like a quote-unquote meta build that people would have. And like if this person offering purple medkit with Styptic and extra charges, this is what I think a lot of people would call a meta build. However, if you look at like the Ada, for example, there's a Decisive Strike and Visionary from Felix. I would have never said Visionary is meta, but it is. Apparently in this, no restrictions, just send it sort of a ranked game. And I'm going to be honest, I think it's pretty cool that we got a little bit of a unique meta take compared to what other people were doing and a different strategy that the game has showed. If I can pull up, I'm going to really quickly find the diagram that Otzdarva found. These are the average kill rates that you're going to see right here. This is, a little bit old, but you'll see, I think a lot of people, not super surprising, but Nurse's kill rate is really low. And I think this is partially due to the fact that she's pretty hard to play on console. And that is a big portion of the player base. So it's like important to recognize there's that difference. If you look at the kill rate for every killer on MMRs, average is a 59.1 out of 60. That's pretty close to balanced. This was taken, I believe, roughly when Sadako or Wesker recently came out. And I think when this video came out and people were talking about it, Sadako's got phenomenal teachables. Wesker's a very strong kitted killer. So it feels as though if you look at across all MMRs, the game is pretty balanced. Freddy somehow being super high up baffles me. I think it has to do with the whole blindness thing. Nurse at the bottom is surprising, but once again, I think people understood that. That was a whole, why Nurse was in a rough spot. And then Otz talks about if you were in the top 5% of MMR and you look at it, this tier list seems a bit more fitting. And you'll see the average is at 61.3%, which if you really want to nitpick the 2% difference, it looks like at the higher level of play, killers are more effective. But I don't have the information about what add-ons they brought, what maps you were playing, what perks you're bringing in, what survivors you were going against. This is just top percent MMR. There's so many variables that go into talking about the balance of the game that it's really difficult to honestly pinpoint exactly what makes the game balanced. And I think all of that considered makes this a genuinely interesting discussion to have. Just admittedly. I don't know what you guys think after going over all that information and what I talked about. This is a little bit of a longer video, and I understand that's fine. I'm going to try to wrap it up because admittedly, I think I went over all the points that I really wanted to go off of. But it would be really cool to see how metas might evolve or balance in this game skews when that's the information we're working with. I will say, after reviewing more of this data again and talking a little bit more, watching some other perspectives from tournament play, I think the balance of the game is really hard to decide because there are extremes in play. And Otzdarva talks about this in this video. Once again, I'll leave it linked in the description if you want to check it out. The video, it's great because it breaks down why certain killers or certain choices that are being brought are strong or are considered, balanced. But at the same time, it's not necessarily indicative of balance in the game outright. Probably the biggest thing, I just wanted to skim to make sure that I wasn't missing a detail. I think the biggest thing, and I'll pull up again so you can see the whole, Otzdarva's hierarchy of needs. I think this really speaks volumes about talking about balance of the game, because I think there's so much disparity and I guess you could say deviation between all these components that standardizing them is the best way to look at balance. And of course, that's over a large sample size. But experience, matchmaking, as we know in Dead by Daylight, isn't the best. The MMR system is not the greatest at really finding the most accurate matches between people. So experience, as much as you could say you've played this game and you should be playing a game against better people, I would say matchmaking is not the biggest factor in determining your skill in Dead by Daylight. That being said, I think that in the tournament setting, it's a lot more fair to look at the game, but experience does have value in determining balance. Resources. I think resources in the game are something that not everybody takes to the fullest potential. I also think that in terms of resources for Dead by Daylight, when I play, I do not see multiple eerie or purple add-ons across every single survivor and across every single killer, and everyone bringing an offering with all meta perks and playing extremely efficiently. In terms of resources, well, I guess the efficiency part would kind of be in mindset, but in terms of resources, I don't play like this. I don't think a lot of people have games where they play like this. At least from what I've seen in watching streamers play, in watching, my friends. Of course, this is all anecdotal. There's a lot of games that happen where we are not bringing the best of the best resources. And I think that component is really what skews the perspective of how you view the game being balanced. If we are talking about balance in the game, and you talk about 4 average survivors, and this is the thing, like a lot of people start to bring up extremes, which I understand at a certain point you'll recognize extremes are valid perspectives to bring in. But it's like, when you talk about resources being brought into the game, I don't see every game Blights bringing Compound 33 Alk Ring. If that happened every single game, and I know that, or the Blights doing like double speed add-ons, which is pretty good in my experience, like, that's brutal. That's brutal to go against, And when you look at Nurse, if you give Nurse triple blink and recharge add-on, I don't even know if she has recharge add-ons anymore. But like, when you see those crazy out-of-pocket add-ons on Killer, like, it seems like the game can be killer-sided and can't be stopped. If you look at, let's just say I'm playing, I'm not even going to say like Trapper. Let's just say Ghostface, right? I don't think Ghostface is extremely meta. I'd say he's probably slightly below the average of killers in terms of strength. But like, you put that against 4 survivors that are all running probably, I don't know, I would say maybe like adrenalines, couple prove thyself, all exhaustion perks, all, maybe one chase perk. Like, it's just, there's so much disparity in the resources that could be brought into a game that I feel like also skews the balance quite a bit. And it's not even just between killer and survivor. It's like among other killers, right? The best nurse in the world with the best resources that she could bring in compared to the best Sadako. Like, I know Sadako could put in work. I know nurse can put in work. I admittedly would probably put my money on the nurse, that a very good nurse with the best that they could bring in compared to a very good Sadako with the best they could bring in, the nurse is going to stomp the majority of those games over a Sadako might have. Like, they probably could still stomp, but they might have a few difficulties, Or, I don't mean to go to the extreme, but let's look at like Trapper, right? Like, to say the game is killer sided, but then you look at the best of the best that Trapper could bring in, like, I think Scott Jun talked about it in his video, but like, Trapper is never gonna get 1,000 win streak the way that Momo got 1,000 on Blight, right? That's just because Nurse, Blight, Spirit, those killers have very powerful add-ons, extremely good base kits, and when brought to the best of their ability, can roll games. Yet, when you look on the weaker side of killers, something like Trapper, I personally don't have too much struggling with Wraith, but I know Wraith, like with Silent Bell, can, on an indoor map, I've gotten rolled by it. I've gotten rolled by Freddy's, but I think Freddy is pretty weak. That just shows I'm not a great player. But like, I feel like there's a disparity even with the weakest and strongest base kit killers and the best that they can bring. And I feel like that is a component of balance that people don't really talk about, where even within that set, there's a big difference. And, kind of similarly, if you go to like a Survivor Note, for example, the difference between running, for example, like Hope versus Boon Shadow Step, they're both movement speed perks. I'd argue Hope is way better. You look at just the fact that any perk that you can run on Survivor, while there is merit for it, it feels like your optimal perks kind of pigeonhole towards a strong perk meta if you really want to be the best of the best. And it sucks that some perks just don't see play. Like, in my opinion, when I solo queue, Kindred's a pretty useful perk. I don't think it's meta, but I think it's pretty good. If we want to talk about, the best of the best resources, no one's bringing Kindred. You're coordinated. You don't need, to talk about all that stuff. But it's just the fact that like resources, even within those divisions of survivor only or killer only, also has a big disparity. Mindset, I know the background footage stopped. I'm sorry. This is like kind of wrapping everything up. This video is definitely going longer than I thought, so I do want to clear it up. In terms of mindset, I personally don't play with a mindset to win. I know some people do. I know some people who firmly think that if I win, I have fun. And by all means, if that's how you have fun in the game, play that way. I personally don't. I just want that to be known that when I don't play with a competitive mindset, I'm not sweating as much on killer. I'm a lot more lax and less attentive on survivor. I don't play with a mindset to win. And admittedly, once again, like I said, how this kind of ties back, I have a bit more experience in the game. It makes my mindset mean I want to play the game more casually. And in turn, the resources I bring into the game are not good. That's just kind of how like the levels of that triangle tie in together. I don't think it's a, mutually exclusive category to work with. It's just, at least for me, that's how I experience the game. With my friends who have a little bit less experience, they want to win more, so they run meta perks. RNG is the only component that you can't really, like tie into, but if we want to talk about RNG, technically maps, palettes, things like that, like hook spawns, that's all RNG based. But at the same time, if you're really talking about bringing the best resources, bring a map offering. It's not up to RNG that way. Pallets or the map you get from the offering, that is RNG. Fractured Cowshed, brutal. Like, you're just not going to be able to do anything about that. I felt like this was all, I kind of rambled on a little bit, but I think that overall, it's a really interesting perspective and amount of information to take into when talking about Dead by Daylight's balance. I think, admittedly, overall, the game is a lot more balanced, at least statistically, and from what I'm looking at in terms of data. However, there are many extremes for a lot of different killers and survivors that make the game feel unbalanced. It's kind of weird that like the game is quote unquote balanced because everyone just has some kind of broken shit to do. right? Like, if everyone's got some access to something that feels broken or overpowered, the game's balanced. Technically, yeah. But I think that doesn't mean the game is balanced and perfectly healthy. I think Blight's add-ons are all very, very powerful. Otzdarva, I think, made in his tweet, like, how does Blight get away with having so many good add-ons, but Billy's getting targeted by nerfs? You know, things like that. It's just like, it really puts into perspective what survivors or killers are trying to bring in and how that really influences the state of the game. If you made it this far into the video, thank you. I'm wrapping it up, I promise. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, comment down below what you guys think about the balance of the game. Please keep conversation civil. If there is any form of hate speech or something toxic that is going on, I will not hesitate to delete your comments. I've done it in the past. Some people just go out of pocket from discussions. I don't want that on my channel. I would say leave that to Twitter. But that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, Otzdarva, if you want to watch his perspective on all of these bits of information, I kind of go over it, but he words it pretty good. Hens has the full 5 games. I'll leave both of those videos in the description, as well as Momo's Twitch channel. Please go say hi. Make sure that you're not, doing anything negative. That's the last thing I'd want, especially because they've already vocalized some frustrations with people online. Yeah, that's really it. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. I appreciate it. Damn, this is a long video. I am so sorry you had to deal with all this. Take care, everybody, and peace.